The morning light in the courtroom of Judge Judy Justice was clear and bright, casting long shadows across the polished wooden benches, where the quiet hopes and frustrations of everyday people came to find a voice. It was a place where the tangled threads of human lives were brought to be straightened by the firm hand of reason and the steady light of the law. On this particular day, the atmosphere was thick with stories of unexpected turns and the search for accountability in a world that often feels unpredictable and chaotic. The first story began with a woman named Bonnie Bailey, whose morning had started with a simple, mundane trip to the orthodontist and ended with a sight she would never forget. Bonnie Bailey sat at her podium, her expression a mix of lingering shock and the weary patience of someone who had been through a long and exhausting ordeal. She explained to the judge that on the 4th of April of this year, her world had been disrupted in an instant. It was approximately 9:40 in the morning, a time when most people were settling into their daily routines. Bonnie had been at the dentist, sitting in the chair while the practitioners were busy taking the wires out of her braces. It was supposed to be a routine appointment for a minor self-improvement. However, the peace of the office was shattered when someone called out to ask what kind of car she drove. When she answered that she drove an Audi, the response was a heavy silence followed by a gentle suggestion that she might want to step outside and see what had happened on the street. What Bonnie saw when she reached the sidewalk was a scene of great commotion and distress. Several cars had been struck, and the air was thick with the sound of sirens and the sight of people in tears. Her own car, which she had worked hard to pay off in full so she would not have to worry about a monthly bill, was now a mangled heap of metal. It was total beyond repair. In that moment of confusion, she felt a profound sense of loss. She had chosen not to carry collision insurance to keep her monthly costs down, a decision that many people make when they own their vehicles outright and trust in the safety of their surroundings. Now, she was left with a car that could no longer be driven and a deep mystery as to who was truly responsible for the sudden devastation. Across the room stood Stephen Chicos, a young man who had been driving a 2011 Mazda 3 on that same fateful morning. He was on his way to drop his girlfriend off at home before heading to his place of work. His story added a layer of dramatic complexity to the events. He described how he had been traveling in the left lane, the faster lane of traffic, for about a quarter or a half a mile. As he approached a familiar intersection at Beverly and Alvarado, where he knew a backup usually occurred due to people turning left, he decided to merge into the right-hand lane to stay moving. He was a careful driver, one who checked his mirrors and looked over his right shoulder before acting. He saw a white car far behind him and a blue BMW in the fast lane behind his own vehicle. He believed he had plenty of space to make his move safely. However, as Stephen began to merge, the blue BMW decided to take a reckless and impatient path. In a burst of speed, the driver of the blue BMW cut off the white car and attempted to whip past Stephen just as his Mazda was halfway into the right lane. The resulting collision was not a simple accident, but a display of extreme recklessness. The blue BMW struck Stephen and then careened with terrifying force into the parked Audi belonging to Bonnie Bailey. The impact was so great that it seemed to defy the quiet nature of the morning. The courtroom fell into a thoughtful silence as a video of the incident was played on the screen. The images captured the sheer intensity of the impact. Judge Judy Justice watched the footage closely, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She noted that the blue BMW was traveling much too fast for a city street. It was a display of driving so dangerous that it could have easily resulted in a tragedy far greater than mere property damage. There was a moment in the video where a man in a small blue car, which looked like a Volkswagen, was standing just outside his vehicle. By the grace of God and perhaps a bit of luck, he managed to avoid being obliterated by the speeding BMW by mere inches. He was, as the judge observed, the luckiest man alive in that moment. The judge turned her attention back to the parties with a look of firm clarity. She understood Bonnie's frustration at having a total car and no one willing to take immediate responsibility. But she also had to be fair to Stephen Chicos. Based on the evidence of the video, it was clear that Stephen had been merging correctly and that the fault lay squarely with the driver of the blue BMW. The insurance company for the BMW had tried to avoid paying by claiming their driver was not at fault, but the visual record told a different story of recklessness and speed. Judge Judy Justice advised Bonnie that while she could not give a judgment against Stephen because he was not the one who caused the damage, she was more than happy to sign a document that Bonnie could show to the insurance carrier of the BMW. It was a lesson in the importance of pursuing the right person in the eyes of the law. The case against Stephen was dismissed, but the path for Bonnie to find true justice was now clearer and more certain. As one case ended with a lesson on responsibility and evidence, another began, shifting the focus from the streets of the city to the emotional landscape of a grieving family. Case number 3013 brought forth Cheryl Toole and her former daughter-in-law, Ariel Messenger. This was a story born out of a profound tragedy that had occurred on the 3rd of December of the previous year. Cheryl's daughter, Brandy Hotelling, had been taken from this world in a tragic automobile accident, leaving behind 3 young children who now face a future without their mother. In the wake of such a devastating loss, the community had come together to offer support in the way that neighbors often do. Ariel Messenger, who had been separated from Cheryl's son for 5 or 6 years, but still felt a deep and abiding connection to the family, decided to take action. She organized a fundraiser at the bar where she worked, a spaghetti dinner meant to help Brandy be laid to rest and to provide for the 3 children. The bar had donated the space, and members of the community had donated food, baked goods, and items for raffles. People paid $15 for a meal, and by the end of the night, $1,800 had been raised through the collective kindness of strangers and friends alike. However, a conflict had arisen regarding how that money should be managed for the long term. Cheryl Toole, who now had interim custody of her 3 grandchildren, felt that the money should be turned over to her immediately. She was facing many unexpected expenses, such as emptying her daughter's apartment, putting belongings into storage, and moving the children into a new house. She felt that as a primary caregiver, she was a natural choice to hold and spend the funds as she saw fit. Ariel Messenger had a different perspective, one rooted in a desire for long-term security. She had run the benefit with the intention of creating a lasting resource for the children. She wanted to open accounts for them, but she stated that she needed their social security numbers to do so properly. She was hesitant to simply give the cash away for general expenses, fearing that it might be used for immediate needs rather than for the long-term benefit and future of the children, which was what she believed the donors had intended. Judge Judy Justice listened with a patience that reflected the sensitivity of the matter. She spoke to Cheryl about the legal realities of her situation with kindness but firmness. She explained that while Cheryl had many expenses related to her daughter's passing, those were separate from the specific purpose of the fundraiser. She also shared an important piece of educational information regarding Social Security. Since Brandy had been a working person for most of her life, her minor children were entitled to Social Security benefits. The judge urged Cheryl to pursue these benefits as soon as the custody matters were fully resolved, as they would provide a steady and reliable source of support for the children's needs. The judge then turned to the question of the fundraiser money, seeking a path that would satisfy the needs of the children while respecting the efforts of the person who raised the funds. She understood Ariel's desire to be the one in charge of the money she had worked so hard to collect. She explained that there are legal ways to protect money for minors, such as the Uniform Gift of Minors Act, which allows an adult to hold an account for the benefit of a child until they reach adulthood. However, since there was a lack of cooperation regarding the sharing of Social Security numbers due to a lack of trust between the 2 women, the judge proposed a different and creative solution. She suggested that Ariel use the $1,800 to purchase United States savings bonds in the names of the 3 children. This would allow the money to grow with interest over time and ensure that it would be available to them when they reached the age of 18 or 21. It was a way to honor the memory of their mother and provide them with a small nest egg for their future, perhaps to help with their education or starting their own lives. A savings bond is a promise of future security, one that cannot be easily spent on temporary needs. Cheryl Toole expressed some concern, questioning if the flyer for the fundraiser had been misleading by mentioning her deceased daughter. But the judge gently explained that while a deceased person cannot be helped directly, the best way to honor a memory is through the children left behind. By the end of the discussion, a sense of peace seemed to return to the room. Ariel agreed to purchase the bonds, and the court clerk will hold the proof of purchase until everything was finalized. It was a fair resolution that kept the focus on the children where it belonged. The stories of that day serve as a powerful reminder that life is filled with unexpected challenges, from reckless drivers on the road to the sudden loss of a loved one. But in each case, there was a lesson about the importance of acting with integrity, thinking of the future and seeking the truth. Whether it was the grace of God that saved a man from a speeding car or the community spirit that raised money for grieving children, the values of humanity and justice remained the guiding stars. The court was adjourned, and the parties walked away with a little more wisdom and a clearer path forward in their lives. The children would have their bonds. Bonnie would have a path to pursue her insurance claim against a reckless driver, and the community would continue to move forward, one small act of kindness and one fair decision at a time. It was a day of growth, of learning, and of finding hope in the midst of conflict.